Hey, Mommy.
Hey, Heather. How you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful.
Tell them about when you went shopping and you thought, man, these shoes are comfortable.
All my baubles. Well, I have some on my little toe on my right foot. It looks like a bunion.
Oh.
And there are hardly any shoes I can wear that are comfortable for very long. And the other day I was in Walmart walking around and I thought, well, at least I have comfortable shoes on today. And I looked down and I had my house slippers on. They were comfy.
Hey y'all, from Spindle Mountain Mercantile, I am Heather, and Mama's here too today. Welcome to our YouTube channel. We're bringing you 5 fun projects today to brighten your spring, so let's get started right away with project number 1. I have no idea how I originally acquired these. All I do know is I was going through my stash the other day and I found 2 huge totes full of Easter products. A lot of them were miniatures. At the end of today's video, I'll show you a bunch more that turned out to be valuable. At the end of this project, remember the different sizes between these 2. Okay, we're starting with this little one. It's up on a soapbox and I think it's holding a postman's bag. I want to tone down the color, so I'm painting it with DIY crinoline and then topping that with just a dab of DIY dark wax. And then I wiped it back. You can see the difference between one that I did not wipe back, one that I did wipe back, and the one on the left, which is original. I found this little basket too, and I wanted to use it alone, but it wouldn't stand up. And my sweet husband said he wouldn't sand the bottom down because it would break it. Well, he was probably right. So we're just going to do something different with it. I heated it up to remove the copious amounts of glue that were on there, and then I used a paper towel and pulled it right off. It was super easy. Something else I found in the totes were things I had done at previous Easters, including this little wooden Easter egg that I decoupaged, and I thought this would make a great base for my little basket. The basket has some damage, so instead of going to the trouble of fixing it, I just decided to cut that off, and I'll cover it up with something else later. I did put a little bit of glue on it, and I used a toothpick to kind of poke the pieces back down and smooth out the glue. It turned out later I really didn't need to do that. But I thought I would show you because maybe on a bigger basket, that might be what you need to do. Over at Graphics Fairy, I found the sweetest vintage and antique Easter pictures. I made some very small and printed them out, and then I cut around them and am using them in different projects. I cut the edges around this one so it wouldn't, be easy to catch on something. And later on, I decided to cut off that little 4th bunny because it was just kind of awkward sticking out that far and it really didn't need it. Next, I filled the little basket with just a bit of sphagnum moss that I took out of another project. And then I added the chicks. I put 2 in the basket and 1 on top of the egg. I also added some little miniature eggs that I found in that same tote. Then I took some florals and I pulled them off of the stem and I cut them into even smaller pieces. So there was only like maybe 3 or 5 little tiny pieces of flower on each little part that I glued in. I filled the entire basket with them, and I also put some around the chick and the eggs on the bottom. Next, I used this really awesome greenery that I found at Dollar Tree, and I'm not kidding. I bet I could do more than 10, maybe 12 little scenes like this with just 1 stem of that greenery. It has so many little pieces you can cut off. I tucked little bits of the greenery underneath the flowers in the basket, not in a lot of places, just a little bit for accent. And then I put them all around the stuff on the bottom. I thought I'd put a bow over where I took the glue off of the basket, but I decided to just use the greenery instead. I thought I was done, and of course I was not. Y'all, I didn't like those little tiny chicks. I thought they were too little and they were too muted. I needed something brighter for this little basket. And I'm really glad I went with that decision because this is the cutest little Easter vignette I think I've ever made. I mean, seriously, how sweet is this? Project number 2 is another small vignette, and I'm making it with this little red and blue bird I found amongst the miniatures that were in that tote. Her beak has been scratched, so I'm just going to color it in with a metallic marker I found on Amazon instead of trying to find the exact paint to match the rest of her beak. If I really wanted these to stick together permanently, I would use something like a 2-part epoxy. But since this might be a collectible to somebody, I want them to be able to take it apart if they so choose. It's not worth that much, but to a collector it could be. So I'm only using my hot glue gun to attach the teacup to the saucer. I put more hot glue in the inside, and then I just used some Amazon packaging paper to put in that for the base. Next, I made a wreath, but I didn't do a great job, so I'm remaking it the next morning, and that's what you're watching right now. I took some grapevine and I unwound the wire that keeps it all together. Then I put the pieces I needed that I thought would be just a little bit longer than I needed in some hot water, and I let it sit for a couple hours. I came back and it was very pliable, so now I can work with it better. I started by holding it very tightly in one hand and twisting a circle about as big as I thought the base of the nest would need to be. Then I pinched it together with my other hand very tightly, while I grabbed that wire and put it through the wreath and wrapped it up around where I was holding it. I made it as tight as I could get it, and then I just moved it over a little bit, maybe a half an inch clockwise, and I wound it around more of the grapevine. I continued doing that until I got all the way around. And then I just added in a little bit of the grapevine that had some of that corkscrew, little thingies sticking up. So it would look more realistic, like a bird's nest and not just some curved round sticks. I thought this worked very well, and next time I'm going to try it just with some sticks I find outside. It's perfect. I cut more of my favorite greenery and I put it around the top of the teacup. I wouldn't say it was sparse, but I didn't fill it in so it was solid greenery all the way around. There's a bird that's making a nest on our side porch, and we've just left her alone out there. And I have noticed what she's been doing, and I'm trying the best I can to mimic it a little bit. I glued the nest down on top of the greenery, and then I found things like some sphagnum moss that was kind of messed up and left over from another project, so it was kind of mushy, and some pieces of leftover drop cloth that were frayed, and I pulled the strings out of that, and I just added a little bit more sticks and different things until I felt like it looked more like a real nest. I glued that sweet mama birdie right on top of everything, and I used my heat gun to get rid of my glue strings, which were plentiful. And that is when I decided I can't have any more favorites, because every time I declare I have a favorite, then there's a new one. And I think this is my new favorite spring miniature vignette. Mama's taken over for project number 3.
If you wet your finger, it'll separate the napkin from the back. And you have to take off the back, so you just have the colored part of the napkin. You have to remove all the plies.
These were only 2-ply napkins, but we also have 3-ply napkins. Whichever ones you use, you just want to make sure that you get all of those back pieces off. We save those too to use for, napkins. We have some great sets of napkins available on our website. I will leave a link for those in the description. Mama painted this little box with Debbie's DIY cottage color in white linen. And then she used a heat gun to dry it because we are impatient. Now she is using liquid patina in crystal clear chandelier as a decoupage medium. This pretty napkin has a scalloped edge border. It goes all the way around. I cut it so that there's only border on the bottom piece Mama is applying right now. She's simply overlapping when she gets to the next piece, and for the part on the top, she just pushes it over. She doesn't use any decoupage medium inside or on top of the side of the box because we're going to use sandpaper to take that excess off. Because those corners aren't exactly squared, when she puts the paper over them, she did have to readjust it, so there'll be a little bit of a wrinkle on the sides, which you can't really see. To avoid that, you could cut the paper, but I don't like to do that because sometimes I've done that and I cut it the wrong way so that the gap is bigger on one side, and I would have rather just had a little tiny wrinkle than a big gap. For the lid, Mama did the top part first, and then she folded down the sides where she had already put her decoupage medium. And now she's just cutting a slit on the corners. You can do it that way, or you can cut out a little square so that your paper won't overlap. But again, I prefer it overlapping than having a little gap. Mama has really enjoyed messing around with IOD molds, and today she chose the primitive mold. She's going to make just the flower that's in the center. I asked her, what's the most important thing you want our viewers to know about molds? She said, can I tell them 2 things? I told her, of course. Mama said, number 1, make sure you properly store your clay. Put it in 3 different baggies and make sure they're sealed up real tight. Make sure you squeeze the air out. And then she said, but the most important thing is they are so much fun.
Look at that. I did it.
You did it, Mommy.
I didn't think I could do it. I'm using a paint with a primer and a sealer. It's Debbie's DIY Cottage Colors, and the color is Garden Sage. It's a beautiful color. And once I paint it, as soon as the box is ready, it's ready to go.
Mama wanted me to try the ironing thing on this, so the next day I got out some parchment paper and just started ironing away. It worked so well I had to go get my sweet husband to come back and film this, and even he was really amazed.
Ooh, yeah, that's a lot better.
That is so different. Wow, crazy. Thank you. Appreciate it.
To make sure it stuck, I put the little knob in the clay before it dried. When it did dry, I put white wax all over the top of it, and then I glued the whole thing on with my glue gun. And here's the result. For project number 4, I'm doing something I've never tried before, but the first part of it I know quite well. It's IOD's Spring 2026 release mold called Wreaths and Swags. I'm only going to cast the bow, and that design is made to look like one long, continuous, very thin strip of ribbon. Whenever I cast something that's long and narrow, I like to use one piece of clay. That way I'm less likely to break it or have a big crack. I'm using Iron Orchid Designs air dry clay for this, and before I put it in the mold, I just rubbed a big piece through my hand until it was long and skinny. A lot of creators use cornstarch in their molds, and sometimes I do. When it's something this small though, I don't want any little pock marks, and I tend to get those if I use cornstarch. It's kind of a big debate, which is funny. The sisters who created IOD, one of them prefers cornstarch and one of them does not. So it really is up to the person who's doing the casting. And either way is just fine. When I don't use cornstarch, I use my fingernail to just coax the clay out. And almost always it comes out very easily. I do have to do a little bit more coaxing when it's something long and thin, like this bow. But as you can see, it came out pretty easily, and it looks really good and very smooth without any pockmarks. My friend Sherry has a great eye for design, and sometimes she has more stuff than she does time to create something with it. So she hands some of those items off to me. That's how I obtained this great metal tin that can be either hung on the wall Or you can use the stand to put it on a piece of furniture. I bet I turned it over about 5 times to make sure I knew where the center was before I put my Titebond Quick and Thick on the back of the bow and used a brush to make sure it was spread out over every little tiny bit of that bow so I could get it right in the center of the top of this plaque. This kind of makes it look like I just sort of tossed it on there. I promise I had my hand really close to it when I turned it over so that it was in the top. The tails like to hang down, but I wanted them to go out to the sides of the plaque, so I just kind of pushed them up until I got them in the position I want. And of course, that got glue everywhere. I tried removing it with a wet brush, and that just made a bigger mess. So I just finally took it in the bathroom and rinsed off the whole thing. It didn't mess it up at all, and it did leave the glue intact that was on the back of the bow. I'm using Debbie's Design Diary DIY paint in the color crinoline, and y'all who know me know that I have 2 kinds of crinoline. I have my icky crinoline that fell on the floor and I just scooped it right back into the can so it's kind of chunky, and I have my good crinoline. Some of you will be very pleased to know that today I'm using my good crinoline. This paint is highly pigmented and it is made out of clay, so it's never ever going to have no brush strokes. To get fewer brush strokes, don't use your icky crinoline first of all. Make sure you use paint that hasn't been contaminated. My favorite way to handle brush strokes is just to know they're inevitable and to embrace them and make them look as good as possible. We're using IOD's new spring release paint inlay that I cannot pronounce the name. If you want to learn how to pronounce it, you could go to maybe Google Translate. I know I could too, but I can hear it. I just can't say it. I've heard a lot of y'all are afraid to apply paint inlays. I would urge you to try them, especially if you like a distressed look. My mama is really good at these, and she didn't even learn how to do them until last year, and she's 88. Paint inlays differ from transfers in that transfers are made with ink and paint inlays are made with paint. You can see I lifted this up again to make sure I had the exact center. And I didn't quite have it on right, so I did twist it a little bit. There's been times where I have lifted up the entire transfer and started again. If you do it very quickly in the beginning, then you won't get any smears. If you look at a paint inlay before you put it on your piece, you'll see that the paint is already distressed. So even if you get out all of the bubbles and wrinkles, it's still going to have a distressed look. That's just the nature of paint inlays. I love that look, so I'm good with it. If that's not something you like, you might want to stick with transfers. To make sure you get the least amount of air bubbles and wrinkles, you want to smooth out your paint inlay once it's applied to your surface. For this project, I simply used my fingers, but for others, I use a wet or just damp towel, and then sometimes I'll use a brayer. A brayer is really popular with other creators, though. You need to let your transfer dry until you can no longer see through it. So it's going to look like it did before you applied it. At that point, you spray it with water again. And that might sound counterintuitive, but you have to get the paper wet so it will release from the paint that it came with. After I get the paper wet again, I like to use a damp towel and just gently rub and mostly tap everywhere on the surface so that the entire piece of paper is wet. You don't want to rub hard because that will smear it. And now it's ready for the magic. You find a place that's easy to lift up. You don't want to scratch that paint with your fingernail. It's really easy to do that. Then you simply pull that paper back and you kind of go at the speed that it just comes naturally. As it's peeling away, you'll feel how fast to pull and how hard to pull. And I'm telling y'all, one of the reasons I want you to try paint inlays is because of the feeling you get during this part. It is magical. But now I'm going to do my new technique I learned. I am going to make this look like a watercolor painting. When I saw Susie on the farm do this, I was so intrigued. It reminds me of coloring, and I love to color, but it's always a huge waste of time because before I know it, half a day is gone and I haven't done anything I was supposed to do. Instead, I just colored. All I'm doing is using a wet brush. Now, it depends on where you paint and how wet your brush is as to what color you're getting. And as you can see, it almost looks like I'm using different colors or shades of browns. And really all it is I'm using more water in some places, and in other places, there's not as much original paint. So in those places, when I smear it, it makes it look like it's a lighter color of brown. And I just love that. I love how shaded this looks. If you want to get some exact blending and not spread it out quite as much, you could use a smaller brush. This is definitely something I am going to do again. Most likely when I mess up a paint inlay next time, I will try this technique. It will be fun to try it on paint inlays that have different colors instead of something that only uses one color. But even if I don't mess up a paint inlay and I get a pretty good application like I did with this cow, I'll definitely do it again. It was a lot of fun, and I really, really like how it looks. And did I mention it was fun? Okay, yeah, it was fun. After I got that sweet cow looking just how I wanted her, I did some more of the watercolor technique on the butterfly. When I was done, I got out my Debbie's dark wax and applied some with a regular brush to the bow casting. Then I used a dry, fluffy towel to rub it in. At that point, I really loved how it had turned out so far, but I knew it needed more and I wasn't sure what to do with it. That was about 3 weeks ago. Fast forward to when I was organizing my florals last week and I found these little wheat pieces that I thought would really match the wheat that goes down around the sides of the cow, but they're pretty bright, so I needed to mute this down quite a bit. I decided to go full floral on this, so I started by putting lamb's ear sets on either side of the cow and working my way down to the center of the bottom of the plaque. I want you to see this whole process, but it did take me maybe an hour, so I'm going to speed it up to about 10 times the actual speed so you can see the whole process. Most of these florals I just pulled off the stem, and some of them I even cut the plastic part away that goes on the stem. There were a couple places where I wanted the flower to kind of pull up so you could see more of the top of it than from the side, and for those I did use a small wire. Towards the end of adding the flowers, I realized I could put those little bright pieces of wheat in and they would no longer be too bright when they are surrounded with all of those muted colors. I also realized this is one of those projects where more is more, so I got out my Debbie's liquid patina in the color Pennies from Heaven. This is available on our website at spindlemountainmercantile.com, where if you spend more than $70, we pay for your shipping. Debbie's liquid patina comes in clear and several colors. For the ones that do have pigment, you can put them on very thick and it makes them look opaque. If you put them on thin, it's going to make them translucent. I want them to be opaque, so I used quite a bit. I added it to the bow and to the places on the inlay itself that looked like it would have maybe been made out of metal. Then I applied it around the edge of the entire plaque where there were no florals. I did this with different methods so that it would look more natural. Sometimes I just used the end of the bristles, sometimes I used the whole entire brush, and other times I just rolled the sides of the bristles around it. I forgot to tell you that before I started the florals, I sealed this because both the paint inlay and clay-based paint are water soluble. I used Rust-Oleum 2x Ultra Cover in clear matte. Because I used that really bright wheat, I decided to paint the wheat in the paint inlay. For that, I'm using Debbie's Cottage Color in Garden Sage. First, I put it on a little too thick, so I got some water in a little cup, and I'm just using it out of the lid because I don't want to get it all cross-contaminated with water. I still had a little bit too much, so I got a paper towel and I just started really wiping off the paint. Since I already had a lot of paint right here, I just continued moving that paint around to fill in where the wheat is and to also make it thinner. And I'm just using a wet brush for that. I did the same technique with Debbie's Vintage Pink in Cottage Colors to paint the bow that's on the paint inlay. Then I went over to the butterfly and I added a little bit of green and pink to her as well. Nothing I painted after I did the florals has to be sealed because they all have built-in sealers. I decided I wanted even more on this project, and what better way to add more than by giving it a big old bow. For that, I took one big long strip of fabric and frayed it on the sides. I laid that down on my table going across, and then right in the middle going up and down, I put another piece of the same fabric that's shorter and some pieces of lace and other fabric on top of that. So then I took the big long pieces and I tied it over that small pile as if I was tying shoelaces. After I got to the part where I tied the bows, I held one bow with one hand and pulled the other bow really tight, and then I switched hands and did the same thing to the other bow. That way, it won't come loose after it's hanging on the wall. I took the two pieces of smaller fabric that are tied inside the bow and I glued those to the back of the plaque. And this is when I realized that that little D-ring isn't even in the center of the plaque, so I didn't have to worry about centering it. Now I can hang it on the wall or I can stand it up on a dresser or a buffet, and it just looks so cute. Some of y'all might say that more is way too much, but I think it just makes it even better. And I love how this piece turned out. Project number 5 is all Mama. Y'all, sometimes I tell Mama what to say and I take those parts out, but I had to leave it in this time because she is so funny.
And tell them you're sanding it to get it so it's not.
I'm sanding it because they told me to.
It makes it take the paint better.
Makes it take paint better. And I got this at Rose's.
And you can get this Apothecary DIY paint on our website at spindlemountainmercantile.com. Debbie's Design Diary paints are very thick and they're heavily pigmented, so Mama only had to use one coat on this lid. When she was done painting the top and the sides, she went back and made sure all of her paint strokes were going the same direction. Y'all, Mama and I had to open up a third book of Madeline because we like it so much, and there's some pictures we are using more than others. We need to go back and find some ways to use the other things, and that's absolutely not a problem. But for right now, we're just going to use this pretty little wreath with the butterfly. Mama was so excited when she saw that because she knew it would fit the lid of this little caddy, and she was absolutely right. Applying transfers is super easy. Mama likes to say, if Mama can do it, anyone can do it. Just make sure your surface is very clean and very dry. You start by getting your item cut down to the size and shape you need, and then you put it exactly where you want it on your clean item and give it a little press with your hand just to give it that initial stick. Next, you're going to use the application stick. One of them comes in every single Iron Orchid Designs transfer book, and you rub the entire surface of your transfer. Then you go and find one spot to pull back the carrier sheet. That's the plastic sheet with all the grid lines on it that your transfer is on the other side. Pull that back, and where it pulls away from your object, use your transfer stick to rub at that area. Mama likes to rub quite a bit and then check and make sure her transfer is coming up, and then she'll rub a little bit more if it's not, and then she picks it up and pulls, and she does that all over. There are lots of ways to do transfers, and that's one of the things I love about them. Find what works best for you and use that method. But for starters, I always recommend looking at the manufacturer directions and seeing what they say. Once again, we're using Debbie's DIY Liquid Patina in Crystal Clear Chandelier as a sealer. Mama coated the entire top and the sides. Another thing Mama scored on senior day at Rose's was this little glass, and it came with a gold stand. It's a candle holder. Very cute, and I think she only paid $1 for it, or even less because it was 10% off. We weren't planning on filming this. It was just an afterthought because Mama saw the glass sitting there and the Madeline transfers left over, and she just started working on it. I happened to have left the camera on, so I have a little bit of footage. Mostly she held it close to her so you can't see what she's doing. She cleaned it really well with a cotton pad soaked in 91% rubbing alcohol, and now she's applying some of the Madeline transfer. She cut out different butterflies and part of a leftover ribbon that has floral on it. She put the big ribbon with the floral in the front and then added the butterflies around the side so they would be in between the legs of the candle holder. After she burnished it, she again used Debbie's DIY liquid patina in crystal clear chandelier as a sealer. For this, she used a smaller brush and just dabbed it on the places where the transfer are, making sure it just went over the edge a little tiny bit, just enough so that it will seal the edge of the transfer, but it won't go over on the glass enough to make it look filmy. Mama said you never know what you're going to find at Rose's, so she always checks every week, and I think this was an excellent purchase. We will probably put $8 on this when we put it in the booth, and I'm pretty sure it'll get snatched right up. For today's bonus, I have a little surprise for y'all, and after that, I will show you those other miniatures I was telling you about. I want to share this unboxing with you. This is a sample I bought that is something other people already do. I applied to be a vendor for this company. They already have somebody in my area, but they said, hey, we have another very similar product. Would you be interested in trying it and being a vendor for that? And I said, sure. So this is my sample. Any guesses what it is? Y'all, I'm going to start selling milk paint. Sweet Pickins was already taken in my area, and that's totally okay because the company has old-fashioned milk paint brand, and it is fabulous. I am so excited to be able to carry this in my booth. I will have a few finishing products with the Sweet Pickins name on it, like the oil and the wax, but my paint brand is going to be old-fashioned milk paint. I'm super excited to get this on my website starting in April. I don't have an exact date yet, but I'll keep y'all updated. Any company that sends me Dad's Root Beer Barrel Candy, I'm sold already. I gave these samples a try, and I'll show that in one of my next videos, but I'm super excited about this, and I am glad to have y'all along for this ride. And now, as promised, here are the miniatures I found. I got these little pom-poms that are bright yellow and one little turquoise one. These 3 baby ducks came with a mama. They are Wilton cake toppers. I'll probably ask $8 for those. Next, I have these hard plastic animals. There's chicks, bunnies, and ducklings. I think I'll ask $9 for them. I got a bunch of these little flocked white bunnies. I believe they were made in Hong Kong. They sell on eBay for $5 plus shipping. This was the one that was a huge score. I saw this Japan label and was like, okay, I better check that out. They are selling them on Etsy, 2 for $95. I got 6 of them and I'm asking $37. Next, I got a handful of ornaments that are made out of resin, and I believe they're just all different kinds of fruit and vegetables. This is just a big pile of the rest of everything. Some lucite bunnies, some pom-pom bunnies that have also been selling on eBay for $5 plus shipping each, and a little wooden carrot, some other animals. I don't know where I got this. Like I said, I was very shocked and very blessed to find this. We can really use stuff like this in our shop. I want to thank anyone who is new for coming here and watching this video. Mama and I really appreciate that. We have such a great group of subscribers here, and Mama and I hope if you liked our content, you will consider subscribing and becoming one of them as well. I'd like to also welcome back our regular subscribers. Hey, y'all. I have had quite a time trying to catch up with all your wonderful comments. I really appreciate them, and I'm still working on it. I promise I will keep trying to catch up until everybody has been answered. Did y'all have a favorite today? You know, I'm usually going to say mine was one of the miniatures because I love those little vignettes. But I'm telling you what, that little case with the divided tray that my mama made, or put the wreath on the top on the lid, I love that. I don't think the pictures do it justice. And by the way, hey mama, I figured it out. Y'all, mama and I had a dickens of a time trying to understand what that little slot was for inside the divided dish. Well, on the back of that lid is a mirror. And I do believe if you put the mirror in that slot, it makes it at just the perfect angle to put your makeup on or your jewelry, or maybe just to look in the mirror and practice your selfie smile. Aren't you glad I figured that out? I know Mama will be. Okay, I guess I'm ready to wrap it all up. We want to thank everybody for watching our videos and going to our website and making purchases. Mama and I want you to know that it really does help us, and we appreciate that. We are very humbled by that, and we feel blessed. So thank you. We have lots more coming, and we're excited to start on new things as well. Until then, we hope you have a wonderful week. And as always, we hope you are blessed. Bye.